What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. What's up, everybody? This is episode 32 of the Esports Narrative. My guest tonight has researched human performance at the Mayo Clinic. He's a founder at Mobalytics. His name is Amine Issa. Amine is super passionate about changing the way the world sees esports. We're going to talk to him a little bit about that. But first, I want to just welcome you to the show, Amine, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, man. It's great. Hopefully we get to talk about some cool stuff besides just me and what I've done.
No worries. So first, I'm really curious. We were talking before we hit record here. I'm curious, where did you grow up and what was your exposure to video games like growing up?
So I was born in the U.S. and I lived in the U.S. till I was 9. I got my Nintendo for Christmas when I was 5-year-old, and I think maybe 4. And from there, it was kind of like just history, right? It was, we got Mario, Duck Hunt, and the first Ninja Turtles game. I don't know if you've ever played or anyone listening has ever played. That is probably, if not one of the hardest games in existence. And I had a rather stern father, and he said, you're not allowed to buy any other video games till you finish Ninja Turtles 1. And at that time, we thought, when we asked him to buy the first Ninja Turtles games, we thought it was the one in the arcade, which was Turtles 2, actually, when it came out in the NES. And it's much funner and much easier. And Turtles 1 was a horrendous game that was super hard. And it was impossible to beat. We literally couldn't beat it. And we had to take a video camcorder recording of us getting to like World 5 and passing all these obstacles for my father after like 4 months to decide that, okay, I can buy you a new game. But if anyone hasn't played that game, and if you're up for self-torture infliction, just go pick up Turtles 1. But I played games ever since then, ton of games. I moved to Lebanon when I was 9, and we didn't have the luxury of internet and BattleNet, so we'd play a lot in cyber cafes.
Okay.
And so Counter-Strike, StarCraft, Warcraft 3 were big games, especially Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike wasn't my thing, but I definitely liked playing Warcraft and StarCraft, and I got to be really good, and I could go to different LAN cafes and challenge people, so it had a real grassroots scene. Then I moved to the US and to do my Ph.D., and I had high-speed internet and BattleNet, and there went any sort of semblance of a social life, and I would just play all the time. I played through multiple games, from World of Warcraft to League to StarCraft to everything. So
you really fell in love with the the MOBA style or the strategic style game, right? Like you really fell in love with the strategy and the tactics of those games.
Yeah, I was never a micro outplay you kind of person. I was more of a, I'm going to find the best strategy. I'm going to find it before most other people, and I'm going to use it and perfect it. So I'll beat you through strategy. That was always my thing. That's what I enjoyed doing. And so when games were in beta, early on in beta, I was really good at League in beta. We had the number 2 team. And I was ranked 7th on the ladder in League's beta, actually. So, and we played against, back then, Reginald and Dan were on the same team, and we did well. We beat them in the finals tournament. And so I flared you a little bit of shit about that. But yeah, I enjoy playing games when they're early on. I love talking about, strategy, thinking what's the optimal way to play certain things. And, to me, that's where I like games.
Yeah, and I suppose that probably leads into the origin story of Mobalytics, which I'll ask you about in a minute. But first, I'm curious. Well, first of all, how old are you now, Amine?
I'm pretty old as far as gamers go. I think I'm 33.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm 30, so not much older there. So
we both crossed the gap, right? Like
the 18 to 25, typical group.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So you played the Turtles 1. That's right. You couldn't be anything else.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, fast forward a little bit to your research, right? So your PhD, you did that in, I believe it was biomedical engineering. Is that correct? In human performance, I guess you call it. So what is that all about, and what was your PhD like, and what did you focus on and study?
Right. So as I mentioned before, I came from an Arabic background, and I had a very stern father and parents in general. And so to them, being a doctor was a big deal. And I graduated school really young, actually. I was 14 when I finished high school, almost 15.
Sorry to interrupt, but did you have pressure to go into medicine, or was it the opposite?
Absolutely. No, I did. So I graduated high school when I was 14, almost 15. And then, my father asked me like, "Hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to be an engineer or a doctor?" And I said, I want to help people, so I'll be a doctor. And so I went and did biology for my undergrad in Lebanon, and I was playing Warcraft 3 all day, all night at the network instead of studying. But I still managed to get decent grades. School's nowhere near as hard as being good at video games, I don't think. It's just boring for most people, so that's why they won't do well. But I had to do well, otherwise I was not allowed to play. So it was an easy trade-off for me. Just do well on this easy thing. You can play as much video games as you like. So I did that, and then when I got into med school, when I started applying to med school, I realized that I'm gonna have to memorize every bone in the body and do all this like stuff that a computer can do really easily. I don't know why I should bother. And I said I wanted to learn about putting things together, use my brain to think more, and so engineering seemed like a natural option. So I applied after taking the torturous MCAT twice, I applied for a biomedical engineering program, and I got in a really good school, and I went down that route. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't even know you had to do research in a PhD program. I thought like I would get a degree and I'd be able to get a job. And I was really young, and I didn't understand what was going on.
Little naivety there, probably.
Yeah. I was still 18, right? And all I cared about was playing Warcraft 3. And I got into grad school, and I started there. And I really liked the physiology field. How does the human body function? What makes certain athletes so good at what they do? That kind of stuff was always fascinating to me. I actually got into biomedical engineering because I wanted to create a gun arm. I thought that was cool. And so I figured for people who had an amputated, war veterans or anyone.
Interesting.
Or maybe just someone who just wanted to be cool, like a gun arm would be a really awesome thing to make. That sounds really silly.
Wait. How did you come up with that idea? Let's hear the story on that.
Okay. Well, I play a lot of video games, and I watch a lot of movies and anime and all that stuff. And, I thought like being able to research in biomedical engineering, mixing the human body with these other mechanical, electrical, computer processing disciplines, you'd be able to create like a gun arm like Mega Man or Bionic Commando. And so I thought that'd be cool to pursue. And as soon as I started taking digital signal processing courses, I realized that this was not for me. I had no interest in learning how to do all that and making a gun arm.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, luckily, I don't know. I didn't think it was so awesome, but luckily, WoW was out at that time, and so I could spend all my grad school time, because grad school is kind of like your own playground. You get to do whatever you want, right? You don't have to worry about like too many hard deadlines. You've got freedom to explore. You've got this whole path available to you, and you have to do like routine check-ins. So I spent a lot of my time in bursts. I would play a ton of WoW, then I'd finish, just enough of my project to be okay. And I played so much WoW back then that I eventually ended up playing for Fnatic for I think almost a year, and I was racking up 14-hour days really regularly.
And so you were playing WoW for Fnatic, was that right?
Yep. Yeah. Back then, Arena it just came out, and we had a really good Arena team. And we'd go to tournaments.
Yeah,
it was good times. It was good times. Esports was nothing like it was now, but
so what is human performance? That's in your Twitter bio, and I'm curious on what that means and how that relates to esports.
Yeah. So, while I was going to these tournaments, I was like, we won our first check. I was really happy, and it was just like, okay, this is cool. And then I was having some family tension, like, hey, you should be focusing on your studies. And then WoW was really hard to play back then if you wanted to switch your class. If your class became useless in the meta, you have to build a whole new class, invest a ton of time in the gear.
I remember.
And then, you were starting to get, yeah, I'm sure you do. And you get burnt out a little, right? Okay, the game I'm a little burnt out. I've been playing 14 hours a day for the last, I don't know, year and a half. And so you start to look at different things. And what I realized at these tournaments was the most fascinating thing to me was that these people who were playing were so different, but they were all good in their own way. We had a mage who, the most common thing for a mage back then, I'm going to be a little bit technical, was to go out in an arena game and start polymorphing early so that you're fighting 2-on-3. And our mage would come out and he would start doing damage. And that was so different. And he was not the kind of person who would read forums or do any sort of analytical work. He just had really good game instinct. And he was, in my opinion, the best mage at the time. The other guys were always on the forums, always posting theoretical discussions. And I thought that's why they were good. So I started to become really fascinated by like what made different players so good. I knew I was like the most analytical person on our team. I would like build these spreadsheets out, and I would just basically say, hey, like, this is what will happen. This is the kind of comps we're going to face. This is our best bet of beating them, all that kind of stuff. And I was always fascinated by these different types of players. And I was also like, as a kid, I was always fascinated by Michael Jordan and all these great athletes that people always talk about. Like, what makes these people so different, right? How are they so good? I was fascinated myself by the aspect of human performance and greatness. And I decided to focus my studies and finish my Ph.D. and focus on human physiology and the body, and specifically human performance. And I ended up joining a lab that was amazing, and they did all sorts of expeditions to high altitude. They worked with the Navy, the military, the Air Force. They worked with long distance runners, deep sea divers. So people who would run 100 miles in Death Valley for a marathon, or people who would hold their breath underwater for 20 minutes, and just really starting to understand the physiology of these human, what makes these people able to do what they do, what adaptations take place in the body and the mind so that people can reach the state. I was very fascinated by that aspect of greatness. And so I did my postdoctoral research. I was very lucky. I got to work a lot with fighter pilots. I got to climb Everest, climb Kilimanjaro, study famous climbers, and it was really time.
Yeah, and as I was researching some of the work you've did, I came across this video from, I want to say it was from the Mayo Clinic, and you were talking about climbers on Everest, and you were talking about a video game adaptation or some sort of cognitive skill that or test that you were trying to do on the climbers on Everest. Was that something like that?
Yeah. So we had this stint that we worked on with the Air Force, right? And are you familiar with the F-22 fighter jet?
Yeah.
At all? So there was a time when basically the whole fleet got grounded because the pilots were reporting hypoxic incidents, right? And so basically they had a crash in Alaska, and that's a 40, I can't remember the exact number, but it's a very, very expensive plane, something around like 45 million.
Yeah, they're like 40, 45 million.
Yeah.
They were at the time.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden you lose a plane, and there's a danger of loss of life and everything. And so the military is like all trying to figure out like what's going on in our plane, right? What are our pilots experiencing that is causing them to not be able to pilot properly. And there was this, if you're familiar with hypoxia, it's when there's not enough oxygen, and there's not enough oxygen, and how is that affecting your pilots, and how can we detect that, and how can we be sure that that's it? And because our group was a high altitude research group, we got approached and we outfitted people on the planes, and we tried to understand like what was going on in the planes. And what we realized was that we don't know very much about a guy who gets in a plane and goes from 20,000 feet to 60,000 feet in a matter of less than a minute, right? And so even though there had been studies done in the 60s to look at time to go unconscious and these kind of things, there wasn't rigorous body of research around what happens to the human body and how can we predict hypoxic events. And we started to get funding to do these kind of studies. And one of the things we developed was a test to measure cognitive performance in a real-time situation. And basically, what we would do, this is really funny when we talk about it. Now, of course, everything was IRB sanctioned, but we would basically, IRB is the Human Resource Board. Like, you can't do a study on a human being unless a board approves it.
Gotcha.
So everything we did was board approved, but we would put people in chairs, hook them up to about 20 different devices measuring blood flow and blood pressure, eye movements, heart rate, sweat, galvanic skin response, which is something they use in lie detector tests, a whole host of different things. And it's like some mad scientist stuff, but we could put them in this chair and we would deprive them of oxygen as they played this game. And we would try and find where's the breaking point where your performance starts to decline. And so we used that same game when we went up to Everest. Kind of, that was how we validated it. We took people to low oxygen environments and measured their steady deprogression as they climbed and got exposed to less and less oxygen concentration in the air. And so that's the story behind that. And so one of the big things that we did was performance monitoring and trying to understand how physiological performance is connected to cognitive performance in a real-time environment, specifically a hypoxic environment at the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because, like we were talking about before we started recording, before I got into computer science and eventually, IT work and cybersecurity, I was going to be a physician myself. I was going to be a doctor. I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, and I was going to school initially for biology. I was doing the pre-med stuff. So that stuff is really interesting to me, the human physiology and psychology, and everything that you probably studied is super intriguing to me. So I appreciate you sharing that story because it's super interesting.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I think the human body and brain it's so fascinating to think that it's the most complex machine there is, right? And it's like we build super complex things like airplanes, but in reality, our body is still one of the most unsolved mysteries, despite the fact that we know so much about it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how much we have discovered in the last 40 years about the body and the brain, and how much we still do not know. How much the brain is still, like you said, a mystery is just fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
One question I was really curious on to hear your response, because you've studied human performance and athletes, high performance. Why do we have that feeling of wanting to improve? Like, from a high performance athlete or a climber at Everest, what is the driving factor that's wanting us to summit Everest? Why do we have these feelings of wanting to improve and perform at our highest level?
That's a great question, and I think like everyone innately knows the answer. The hardest part is trying to articulate it. And there's a great you brought up Everest, but there's a great movie. It's by it talks about the original guy who was the first one to ascend Everest, Edmund Hillary, and basically one of the statements from that movie is as a human, when you see a mountain, you want to climb it. It's just there looking at you in front of you, and you say, I need to climb it. I want to summit it. It's just part of who we are. And I think evolutionarily, competitiveness is built into our gene system, right, to ensure our survival. So I think whatever it is that you decide that you want to improve and get better, I think a lot of that is part of what is built into our evolutionary DNA. After all, we're a social creature. And then comparing ourselves to others as a measuring stick is always, no matter how civilized or how aware we become, it's always something that is there because it's part of our, I guess, design, if you want to say that. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but what do you think?
Yeah, that's very interesting to me, and I'm curious, transitioning to what you do for Mobalytics and how that relates to your studies and human performance and the things that you studied and researched. How did the idea of Mobalytics come about? What was that process like, discovering that idea and going through the validation process of, hey, this might be something that we could do? How did that come about? Where did the ideation for Mobalytics come from?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It never started as Mobalytics, right? I was always like a data guy, analysis, research, how to improve, what can I do better, scout out other teams, do that stuff. that was always me. And wow, I used to come to the tournaments with this giant stack of papers, and my team looked at me like I was retarded, like literally. And they're like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "It's every other team's armory profiles, their stuff, what they usually run, what they don't, and my notes." And we would go over them before the game day. But I originally started when I was doing this research on fighter pilots and athletes, and we were using all these different techniques like eye tracking and heart rate measurement and heart rate variability and breathing rates to understand what was going on physiologically and psychologically and cognitively in a person. I'm like, I mean, a fighter pilot's not much different from a gamer, right? He sits on a chair, he looks in front of him, and he looks at a few heads-up displays, and he uses a joysticks or control knobs, levers to make an action, right? So his ability to control the environment around him is the main factor. It's his main response. It's not necessarily his physical movements. His manual dexterity is much more important. And I'm like, it's not very different. So why can't we use these same techniques to understand gamers? And so I reached out to a bunch of professional teams, and I was trying to find someone who was interested in doing this kind of work with me. And I've been turned down a lot in my life and in my career, and I was getting turned down a lot. But Steve Aronset from back then Team Curse, and now he's the co-CEO of Team Liquid. He reached out back and said, "Yeah, why don't you come out here and try this stuff out?" So I had a wonderful mentor in my doing my research, and he was really chill, and he said, yeah, you can take whatever you want as long as it comes back in one piece, and as long as you do the work that you're normally doing, I don't mind you using any of this equipment or using any of your time on that. I think that's actually kind of cool. And so with that, I would basically take this $35,000 eye tracking machine on an airplane, as a carry-on, so worried that something would happen to it. And
sure, you're grasping it for dear life.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't even put it in the overhead bin. And I basically would fly out on my own time, on my own dime, to the Team Liquid, to back then Team Curse house in the middle of Las Vegas. And I would crash on the couch, and I would stay there, and I would study some of the gamers who have become really good friends of mine. Back then, it was the old school team, Saint and Cop, and a lot of the guys who play now or who coach now. Even they're that old. So, and I would do these tests, and we found some really cool stuff. We made some cool videos that got some attention, and then I started to think, well, maybe I could make a living out of this. I could make this my job to study gamers. And so I reached out for funding from different sources, and this was like 6 years ago. So still people esports was still even when I was playing, esports was nothing, and it still was almost nothing when I was doing these studies, but it was getting somewhere. And so there was no money for the teams. There was no money to go around. Riot and Blizzard, they entertained the idea with me, but they never gave funding or anything like that. So I kept trying for a while, and then I couldn't get anywhere. And I said, okay, I need to just I love the group I'm working with. I had a great place at the Mayo Clinic. I had a great mentor, a great boss, a great environment. But it's not what I wanted to do. I really wanted to study gaming, and so I said, let me take a step back. Let me take some time off, lower the amount of time that I'm just full absorbed in my work, and I wanted to do some traveling, work on some personal projects. Did you ever feel
like wanting to give up? Like, was there a feeling that you wanted to just throw it in, or were you always just dead set? You knew this is what you wanted to do, and you were super solid on that.
I didn't know that I wanted to do, but I knew that I loved video games more than anything, and that I of course, to answer the feeling that you want to give up, of course, there's always like, you have a great degree, you have a good salary, you're at a high level institution. Mayo Clinic is one of considered by many the best hospital in the world. And you have a good heritage, come from a good family. You can easily just settle down, get married, get a life, and just be a normal contributing person. Why are you so afraid about this? Why do you want to? And I think the answer is not. I never felt that in totally that way. I felt like this is something I really love and I want to do, and I'm having fun chasing it. I never thought that, like, did I have to give up? Sure, it's like shitty that you're spending all your time. So, you have a lot of work and then you want to play and be really good, right? And to understand games, you have to play. I'm not challenger or anything like that. But back then I was Plat 1 and there was only Diamond. So, I just didn't have enough time to play to get higher than that. And Beta, I was really good. So I always had that passion, that drive. And there's always times when it was never giving up, but there was always times it's like, God damn it, why couldn't this be easier? Right? Why can't I get my break? Yeah. It was never like give up, because it was just what I loved, but it was always like, damn, this is fucking hard, man. Why can't I just relax and be like my friends and like just kind of hang out and do nothing and maybe get high a lot and watch Sunny in Philadelphia. I just couldn't. It just wasn't me. I couldn't do that.
Because that's an important lesson. That's something that me, through the medium of this podcast and what I'm trying to do, that's one of the things that I'm trying to stress is these underlying tones with all of my guests, is that they have this sense of knowing, or they have this sense of perseverance and ambition underlying that's helping them move forward. And I think that's something that's an important lesson, and it's often overlooked, right? It's so easy to just throw in the towel and give up and take the easy road. And I think you showed through your perseverance, and the story that you just shared is like, you were declined a lot. Like, you went through a lot.
I didn't mention more than half the stuff. That's
what I was insinuating, that there was probably more under the covers that you just had to persevere through. And I think that is super inspiring for people to hear.
I think I would be remiss not to say that a lot of it also comes from, I think people, I have a lot of love for gaming, but I think people underestimate sometimes the power of anger. And it's not necessarily, anger is never really bad. It just depends on how you use it. And I think a lot of young me was, and maybe even old me now, is still a little angry at the world for looking down on gaming.
Do you think it's like a chip? Do you think it's like a chip on your shoulder?
It's a little bit of a chip, I think. But I think it was a much more back then, right? Because when I was playing professionally for Fnatic, when I was spending so much time playing video games, people always say, "Why are you wasting your time? Why are you wasting your time? Why are you doing this with your time? You could be doing this. This is stupid." And there was this really funny story when I played for Fnatic and we finished second in a big tournament. I got a call from the local newspaper and they asked me for an interview. I'm like, I was 23. I had no fucking idea what that entailed. Just like I had no idea what this podcast would entail, but anyway, I was even more naive back then. And I did this interview and I thought it would appear in the back page of the local newspaper. No one would give a shit. I was on the front page of the newspaper.
And that was what, 6 years ago?
No, that was a longer time ago. It was 07. So
10 years ago.
Burning Crusade. Yeah. So 11, maybe even 06. I can't remember anymore. Burning Crusade when Arena came out. I remember game releases. That's how I measure time.
And for those that aren't aware, like esports didn't exist the way it does now 10 years ago. Like,
no, we used to stay in a shitty hotel. Sometimes they would be cockroach as we pay on our own dime. We would go to these giant warehouses. It would be cold as fuck. Barely any people would be watching. The setups would be ghetto. Everything would start really late. There was no food anywhere. Like, you'd have to like eat like really shitty junk food, and all that stuff really wears on you when you're trying to play in a 12-hour day, and no one cared. And at the end of the day, you have this check, but the people who were there, we all had a great time. It didn't matter because we were all playing games and we're all doing what we wanted to do. So we couldn't make a living off of it at the time. And so I appeared in the front page, and then I had a bunch of doctors come to me and say, like, that's stupid. What are you playing video games for? Like, I would never let my kid touch video games. It's such a waste of time. So they would actually come to me and use their effort and their energy to tell me that in person. And I was like, but there were other people who thought it was cool, right? Not everyone's bad, but I always grew up in a very traditional world and in a traditional family environment, and doing anything that wasn't like towards your traditional social consensus was considered a waste of time. Be a doctor, fit into society, do politics, do religion, have an opinion, have kids. So part of it was a little bit of that, like, that's not me, and I'm going to prove that this can work. So it's not all just love, but there is a very deep love. And if you don't like what you do and you don't love what you do, then the road is never worth it. I don't think anger or money or anything like that can be a sole motivator, but love definitely can be, in my opinion. The other stuff, definitely they can add a fuel to your fire, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So 1 year, the Mobalytics was founded, was it last October, I saw?
Yeah. So I took this life sabbatical, basically, and I met my co-founder at TwitchCon in October. I think TwitchCon is in October. This year it's in October too. So the first TwitchCon ever, I met him. We were Bogdan. We were both at the same panel. It was about esports, and Sir Scoots was the host.
Okay.
Was one of the hosts, and me and him both went to Sir Scoots after the talk, and we asked him the same question, except he asked first. And he asked him, what do you think of Moneyball for esports? I'm like, that's just analytics of players, and that's like what I'm doing. So I quickly pulled him aside, and we just started talking, and we kept talking, and then the idea for Mobalytics kind of came out there, and we worked on it back and forth. We'd never met each other before then. We worked on it back and forth for 3 months, and we decided, let's just do it. And we decided what the first product would should look like. And our mission was to make a tool for all gamers to be able to understand their performance and to improve their performance. And by studying the elite, we can help them and disseminate that information to everyone else. And, I did this in my free time, basically. I was working 2 odd jobs. I was working for an investment company, and I was doing part-time work for the clinic. And I would do this as a hobby for fun, and it kind of all blew up when Bogdan decided to submit 2 hours before the deadline to TechCrunch, and we got accepted. We got accepted to compete. At the time, I was on an expedition in Kilimanjaro, and I came down from.
You're like climbing in a mountain, and I can just picture you like picking up your phone and be like, "Oh yeah, we got accepted." What was that like?
No, you don't have a phone on the mountain, so that's not how it happened. You come down from the mountain and you see like 1,000 messages from Bogdan, and he's like, "Where are you? Where are you? We got accepted. You have to be in San Francisco in a week." I'm like, "What's TechCrunch?" That was literally I didn't know what it was. Bogdan did the submission without me, and then he explained to me. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And you have to understand, when you spend like 10, 15 days out of society, you come back refreshed, but you're tired. I mean, a trip like that takes out of you because you've stressed your body to the maximum. You've slept in uncomfortable environments, and so you kind of need like a week. I remember when we came down from Everest, it took like 3 weeks to recuperate. Luckily, like Diablo 3 came out at that time, so I managed to play a ton of Diablo 3. But so I'm like, fuck, all right, let's do it. I'll fly into San Francisco, and then we did it, and we won TechCrunch, we raised our funding, and now we've been able to deliver our product, and people are using it, and there's still a lot of work that we have to do, but I think that we have something that works, and people have found value in it, and it's so immensely gratifying. I can't. It's hard to describe. Like some days I just get like so happy that you're sad, kind of, that kind of thing, that you're able to talk to a complete stranger who's used something that you and your entire team, which we have a wonderful team that we've built. It's like a family, and have been able to use, and he tells you that he really loves it. And he went from bronze 3 to gold 3 in the last month using it. And he was stuck, and his friends would make fun of it. And when you hear a story like that, some of the stories that people send us, it's like, it's not just worth, it's way beyond worth. You've gone into a whole new universe. So it's really fascinating.
So it's been about a year since you guys founded Mobalytics. What's the last year been like for you developing your team and creating that product? And how's the last year been?
So I think when we started hardcore working on the product, moving it from alpha to beta, most of our testers were friends and family. And they said, hey, this is a cool idea, whatever. Like, and they tested a little bit. We were testing it internally, but we didn't know what people would think. And so when we spent the next 4 or 5 months in crunch mode, hiring people, making the product and everything, and you're making something, and then you're scared, right? You're really scared that maybe it's a good idea in your head and it looks really cool and it works, but will everyone else think it's cool? And that the first, when we launched, we opened the first part of the private beta to people. We let in 1,000 people. And when people start saying, oh man, this is awesome, this is really cool, it was like, you had, that guy Atlas who carries the world, he's carrying it the whole time. You feel like he just dropped it, right? And the weight on your shoulders is gone for a little while. And so it was really a huge relief that they actually liked the direction, the design, and the functionality. So every day is the same. It's like you work all day, and there's users all the time messaging problems, bugs, things break. No, this one didn't work like you thought. I can't tell you how many things we thought would turn out well turned out awful, and how many things we thought turned out awful turned out well. Mm-hmm. And our Discord grew from 10 people to now it's got 7,000. So awesome. It's hard to describe, but it's really. I feel like you said in the last year, to me, it feels like yesterday. So time has moved really fast. The really nice part is that I get to play League to test the product. So I get to play some games, but that's mostly my life is to work on it. Yeah. And I test and I play, and we have a cool group, and we have game nights on Friday at the office, and we play we're starting a D&D campaign, but we play a lot of fun board games. So I think, to me, I'm happy. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I enjoy the ride.
Now, I'm really curious because I know that coming from a technology background, I have some understanding of this, but I believe that there's probably a large misconception as to what machine learning is. So if you would demystify machine learning for us and kind of describe that in layman's terms of what that is and how you use it.
Sure. I will explain it to you like the smarter machine learning experts on my team explain it to me, because I am not the machine learning expert on our team.
Perfect.
Just as a disclaimer. So machine learning is it's a fancy way of saying that your AI, your code will train itself. And so basically you feed it's almost like those old Tamagotchi or Pokemon or Digimon, or even that Monster Rancher game. You feed your code a bunch of data, and then your code looks at the data and tries to identify trends and patterns and basically label them and say that this is what this looks like. So basically a rage quitting farming a rage quitting, split pushing top laner looks like this. I'm just giving an example. We don't actually look for rage quitting, split pushing top laner, but that's an example. You can, and there's all different types of machine learning, but I'm being very broad here. So please, I hope no one just comes at me and says that you're completely wrong. I'm just being very general. And so it's basically trying to feed the computer enough information so that it can start identifying the trends that you're looking for. And the danger of that is that you might have identified feeding, split pushing, rage quitting top laner, but you may have also identified a whole bunch of other stuff with it too. So that means you didn't feed it enough data. And then what the other danger is overfitting, where you feed it too much data and you make it too specific, so it leaves out 90% of these rage quitting top laners and only identifies the Tryndamirs, but you think it's everyone. So that's some of the challenges of working with machine learning.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, and I'm sure you have tons of data to back this next question up, because you said you've gotten feedback from people that have used it, and it's helped them so many ways. What's the secret, I guess, or what's been the biggest thing you've seen improving someone's League of Legends gameplay based on the data that you've seen in the work you guys have done?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're an older guy like me. There was a song that came out a long time ago, and the guy was like, "Don't listen to anything I say, but put on sunscreen." Right? Do you remember that song?
I don't know. Who sang it?
I don't know. I don't remember, but it said something about sex in the champagne room. Don't do this. He'd say, don't do. But if you do one thing, wear sunscreen. That was how the song went. And so if you do one thing in League, for the love of God, learn to farm. It's the one thing you can control. Learn to farm and not die. But that's the one thing that you can control, that we see the most concrete, unvariable gaps in skill between people.
So I just Googled it. Baz Luhrmann? Everybody's free to wear sunscreen?
It was on the radio when I was young, yeah. But that's the one. And I don't believe in the sunscreen part, but I just remember that song.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, just to switch gears a little bit. I know that you guys are focusing right now on League of Legends, right? So because Riot has opened up their API, they have a lot of integration available for people to utilize, as we're seeing, Mobalytics. There's other companies coming out with unique things that are taking advantage of that. Are there other developers opening their APIs, and are you guys, I know it's probably very early to look at other games, but are you looking at other applications to this in other games, and what have you guys kind of seen in that area of who else is opening their APIs?
So the answer to your question is absolutely. Our future goal is to be able to provide. A lot of people on our team play all sorts of games. I played a lot of games, so we love games in general, and any games that are competitive become esports, are ones that are primed for analyzing player performance and watching people improve. So Riot has two huge advantages for League. One, they have the largest player base and probably the most robust esports scene in terms of what you can expect. And two, they have an open API. And it's really great to work with. So props to them. But right now, actually, we are getting ready to launch our Counter-Strike Alpha in the next month or so. So I am a very, very bad Counter-Strike player. I am the best Counter-Strike ghost, and I'm good at getting information from my team, but I am a very bad Counter-Strike player. But we have, luckily, people who are better than me who are working on this. So we plan to move to Counter-Strike really soon. And the goal is in the next 2 years to cover the big titles, like hopefully. So in a game like Counter-Strike, so let me just list off the titles like Overwatch, Dota 2, PUBG, HOTS, all these titles that people play and with varying amounts of enthusiasm. But we'll cover them in the order that seems the most appropriate. And what we look at is ease of extraction of data and interpretation, and also the number of players playing it,
right,
and the strength of the scene. And so a game like Counter-Strike, you have access to a wealth of information, but it's not easy to get. You have to actually, it involves looking at the demo files, right? The actual replays.
Yep.
And so you extract information from the replays, and you can get so much more information than what you would get from a League API, but you have to build the code and you have to go through tons of data and be able to identify the trends you want. So it's much more of a challenge, but the end result, I think you can get a lot more. Blizzard games, there is no data to write for.
I'm assuming Overwatch. That's by design.
Now, Overwatch, there's no data. Actually, maybe it is, but like when you talk to them, they want to do that. They want to provide these things for the community, but they just have so much more that they want to do, right? So, and this is one of the things you realize when you have a startup. Like right now, we've grown to 26 people, and it feels like we're nowhere near enough people to. We have all the times users are like, why isn't this in? And why isn't this in? And like, we're and you're like, we had all this stuff on our drawing board. We have them in the pipeline. We have specifications, but it takes time. It takes time, and you only have so much members of your team. So do you prioritize putting in unranked games into your performance index, or do you prioritize creating this cool new metric that will make aggression much more accurate? Right? So these are the decisions you make every day, and unfortunately, you're making them every day. And there's so much you want to do, but there's only so little time. And I feel like that's a kind of a situation where, like, Riot took 7 seasons to have official replays, right?
Right.
And I'm sure it's not because they didn't want to have them in there, but it's like, what is the most thing that can add value to our players with the people on our team can work on, right? You want your best people working on the best stuff, no matter where you are in your life cycle. So it becomes one of those things. And so ideally we'll be able to figure out these challenges. And we're looking at a lot of technologies like image recognition. And we're also building technologies outside the game that we can use to supplement information inside the game so that we can augment our performance index. So we want to be able to tell if you're a mechanical player or not, right? We want to be able to give you advice based on what type of player you are, not just what your data says in game. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I'm much more well versed in Counter-Strike than I am in League of Legends, and I can see that it being really, really popular just based on the popularity of Counter-Strike and the fan viewer experience, and the fans really wanting to see those kind of data points that you'll be able to pull out is going to be really cool to see. So I would love to have you guys on again and talk more about that if the day comes when the day comes that you guys are getting more into that, and because I think it's super interesting to see how applicable it is across different games, right? Like you get a certain amount of data from League of Legends, you get a certain amount of data from Counter-Strike and Dota, and then you're going to have so much data, you're going to be able to do so much with it and compare those games and contrast them. And it's going to be, data is where the money is, right? Like all the money is in the data.
Well, I mean, that's what the business guys like to say, and it's true to a certain extent, especially in our world. Data is the replacement for fuel as a resource, right? That's why companies like Facebook and Google are multi-billion-dollar companies, because they have data on everyone and everything. The realism is it's really cool. Like if you play League in a specific way, if you play League as a hyper-aggressive brawler type character all the time, you're not gonna play Overwatch as Anna, right?
Right.
You're probably not. So when a new game comes out, we can automatically almost outfit your suit for that game, so you can quickly jump in. And as you get older, you start to realize, I don't have infinite time to explore every new game and catch up with my friends sometimes. Sometimes I'm short on time. So being able to jump right in and kind of know what you want to do and how you want to do it, and know the build that you're supposed to take is really, really cool. Like, and it's one of these barriers that prevents me from entering a lot of games. It's because when I enter a game, just like you, I'm going hard, right? But I don't want to go through that initial start phase where like I have to read all this information and make all these decisions unless I have a ton of free time. So being able to augment that across different games is really powerful.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it makes me think of exactly what you just said. One of the reasons why I played so many characters playing World of Warcraft was because I didn't know what I would like, right? There's melee, there's casters, there's healers, and there's different styles of healers. There's different styles of melee with rogues and warriors, different style of casters. I didn't know what I would like initially because I didn't know until you try it. And it sounds like with this technology, you guys are going to be able to do exactly what you said, predict the style of character and play style you like. And I think, exactly what you said, just to reinforce the point, is like, that's going to help a lot of people get into the game, because they're gonna, if they use this application or this platform to kind of fingerprint their style, they'll be able to enter these different games or these new games when they come out better. And exactly, just to reiterate what you said, it'll remove some of that barrier to entry and help new people come into the game, which will ultimately just help the industry in general, just bringing people in, new people.
Yeah, I think I don't want to advocate for not playing all parts of the game, because I think like you're a better player.
Sure, of course,
right? But could without you leveling every single character to 60 and PvPing with it, could you have went somewhere that could have provided you 90% of the information in 1/10 of the time that it takes you to do all that, or even 1/100th of the time? And as you stop being a college kid or someone with infinite time becomes your most precious resource in life. And so it's just a question of like, you can play every single. I still like to play every single character. Like Destiny 2 came out, I want to create every class because that's me. But like I'm finding I don't have the time to do that, and I still want to play with my friends, and so I have to spend my time getting gear on my main character, right? So it's just a different strokes for different folks kind of thing. But I definitely think that that's one area that we can really help break this barrier for entry, not just for players who play different games, but for people just getting into a game. Yeah.
Now, esports in general, what do you think the esports industry needs to do to continue to grow and be successful?
I kind of think the esports industry is like the Titanic, right? So not that it's gonna sink.
I was waiting. I was waiting so patiently for that.
If it goes wrong, obviously there are ways that you could not have a great ride. But we had a joke about the Mayo Clinic because Mayo was so bad at new initiatives and stuff. It was such a big, when you're working a big company, they take forever.
Sure, they're
to
slow.
Get to new technologies. They're slow. But once they start moving in that direction, you better get the hell out of the way, because the ship it's so big, right? It doesn't stop. And I feel like esports is just going. And whether you like it, whether Congressman Joan likes it, whether your mom likes it, who gives a fuck? Esports is going. And there are millions, hundreds of millions of players playing these games. Esports started without anyone else caring, and esports is going to keep going. I think my biggest fear is if it becomes way too, I guess corporate is the word, too corporatified, and too like there are, TV timeouts, which is absolutely absurd. I can't believe that exists. And it's like, right? Every time I watch football, I think it's really fun to watch the 15-second segments, but I can't believe that people are willing to sit through that much commercials to watch what they want to watch, right? And so this is my biggest fear with esports. And I believe that there are a lot of young, impressionable people in this field. There's a lot of unstructured methodologies for recruiting, putting in players, and the future of these kids. And I think that the most important thing esports can do is, rather than focus on how to make it a big business, is to focus on the health, the well-being, and the mentality of the people who are engaged in this. And I can't imagine being a streamer and a Twitter person and being so open to the often harsh criticism of the people who, it's so easy to criticize of people 24/7, right? Yeah. Like, yeah. And so I think those are the most important things in esports, because whether you like it or I like it or don't like it, it's going to get big. I can't imagine a child that is born today or a child that was born 10 years ago that's not going to grow up with video games. That's not going to use video games somehow in their life. In the future, surgeons are going to be trained through video games. VR is going to be a part of our life. You're going to drive a car as if you're playing a video game, if you drive the car at all, right? So the control mechanisms that we interface with the world are going to be very different than they are today. And so video games are going to feel very natural, like a very natural extension. So esports is going to get big the way I see it, whether anyone likes it or not.
Yeah, and I've spoken to a number of professionals in the fighting game industry, and the sentiment that's the similar sentiment that they presented was that fighting games and the fighting game scene and community is very much grassroots, more so than any other, title you could argue. And Absolutely. They like it that way. They like that there's not a lot of outside corporate influence in it. And I agree with what you're saying, is that there's going to be, esports is going to continue to be huge. And I also think that it's inevitable that there will be some pollination or cross-pollination between the corporate world and esports. I think it's just inevitable because marketers ruin everything. We all know that advertising...
Evil of the world.
Yes. Marketing and advertising ruins the experience of everything, and it's going to be that way with esports. We just have to, as an industry, and the people that have influence, hopefully will have the... I don't want to say integrity, but the balls, so to speak, to stand up to them and be like, no, we're going to preserve the integrity of the industry that we created 15, 20 years ago and try and preserve some of that nostalgia-ness, if that's a word, of esports.
Yeah, right. I agree. And we're not calling all marketing people bad, because if my marketing guy didn't set this up, I wouldn't be here.
Of course.
But I agree with you, and I think the fighting scene is a great example of a grassroots kind of climb, and I think there's a lot of those scenes that are still grassroots and not popular. But I guess I have a question for you. What do you consider the LCS? I mean, it's not grassroots, but I don't consider it corporate. I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, because of the way that they're franchising, I think that it's getting more that way. I think Blizzard's Overwatch League is the ultimate corporatization, of esports that we've seen yet, and that's still yet to be determined and take off. But as far as LCS goes, I think it's a hybrid, right? There's still a sense of that grassroots feel because it's not that old yet. Honestly, if you look at some of the videos and the photos from just a few years ago, it wasn't in big stadiums, it wasn't these huge grand productions. So it's really
Season 1 and 2 were like in a little 50-person place.
Yeah, I was just looking at photos the other day. So it's still very young. It still has that feel. But on the same token, because of the sponsors that are coming in, and particularly, I'll use the buzzword, the non-endemics that are coming into the sport, it is getting more of that feel, and there's a lot of money being flooded into it, which is naturally going to attract some of that, my feeling personally. But I don't think it's as bad as the Overwatch League is going to be.
Yeah, I feel like, I was talking about the LCS in its current state, and I agree it's going to franchising, and I feel like it'll be it's more of a natural evolution than
the
Overwatch League coming out of nowhere and saying, hey, give us 10 million, 20 million, what is it? I forgot how much it is, 15, 20 million
20.
For a team. And we don't even have a proven esports, we haven't even started, and we have all these errors to fix, and we're not even watchable, and so it's just a little different. It's bamboozling to me, but for me, the league scene it seems like a natural ground. Here are these teams, these organizations that have been around for a while, and they've created our fan base. They've built this with us. Here's a chance for you guys to be a part of this thing, rather than an attaché that can be discarded for another attaché.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be the first one to say I don't have the most in-depth experience with League or knowledge of League of Legends, but I think from an onlooker looking at what they're doing with their franchising in the League, I think they're clearly trying to create some long-term sustainability with it, and they're trying the best that they can do to create that and foster that kind of environment for the longevity of their game. That they're looking at the long term clearly.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think our team and we love watching LCS, and like it's so great that you can watch it every week, right? And that regularity is really nice to have, like and you don't have that in other esports. You turn on your thing and there's a tournament sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's differing opinions on that, but just having that regularity and that structure that Riot's created for me as a viewer is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's the what's the word for it? It's being able to do it in a sustainable way that's continuous and reoccurring. It's consistent. They're very consistent with their leagues and what they're doing with their tournament series and things like that, for sure. So I want to talk about one of the last things I wanted to ask you was, what's been the highlight of your career thus far? Like, what's been the shining moment for you? The thing you're most proud of. What's the highlight of your career so far?
I don't know. I don't think about stuff like that. Just think about now. I think there's a lot of them. It's not fair to pick one. Obviously, I could say like winning TechCrunch. I got really, I teared up, and it felt like an amazing validation to me that my beliefs that this is something legitimate and awesome. But also, building our team, having these people on the journey, launching our first beta, but even like meeting my first mentor, who has been amazing to me, winning my first WoW tournament, winning my first Warcraft 3 tournament, killing Nefarian with my guild before we were a legitimate guild that put us on the radar as the best guild on the server. Mm-hmm. Just all these amazing events that I've shared with numerous people along the way. It's really hard to pick one moment to me, I feel like, and I think there'll be many other moments. So, I don't know how to pick one moment. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I think that's one of the most, I think that's one of my favorite answers so far that I guess has given me when I asked that question, because, life is a journey, and it's filled with ups and downs and triumphs and failures and highlights and lowlights. And I think that's just illustrates your passion and your perseverance to continue to pursue the things that you love, and it really shows your passion for what you're doing. And I think that is really awesome and inspiring to see from someone. Oh,
wow. That sounded really nice. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. And it's really been a lot of fun talking to you about, performance and Mobalytics and what you guys are doing in the future of Mobalytics. And hopefully we'll be able to have you on again sometime and talk about some other things you guys are doing, or maybe you're in other games at that point. So I just want to say I appreciate your time tonight, and I had a lot of fun, and thank you for coming on and sharing with us.
And thank you, man. It's been a real pleasure. You've been great to talk to, great listener, and hopefully we can play some games sometime, dude.
Yeah, that would be great. Awesome. I would love to connect online and play something. I am a noob at League. Like I've not played.
I play other games, man. I play other games. I'm a noob at a lot of games.
Good, so good. Okay. Well, Counter-Strike, like I haven't played Counter-Strike in a little while, but I feel like I could brush the dust off a little bit and play Counter-Strike, World of Warcraft, Overwatch. My computer is really bad right now. So I'm working on that, but it's holding its shape, so to speak. It's hanging in there.
Okay, yeah, I could do Overwatch, and maybe when we start testing our Counter-Strike GPA, you can help me do that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love to help any way I can, and whatever I can do for you guys, I would love to help.
Awesome. All right, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning. Hey guys, real quick before you go, I just want to say thanks for listening and supporting the show. It really means a lot to me that you like it, and I hope that if you found some value from this podcast, that you'll share it on Twitter or on Instagram or Facebook, anywhere that you have a social media presence. I would love it if you would just share it with 3 to 4 people that might be interested in it. It would absolutely mean the world to me. It would help me get my name out there, help me get the podcast out there. I do this solely for the love of esports and for the love of getting to know people and hearing the stories of esports that I think are so awesome. So please, if you got value from this, if you enjoyed it, please share it with someone who you think might like it. And with that, I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. 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 I really appreciate it.